Hey everyone, welcome to another episode from Ampro Engineering. This is going to be another installment of the My Car series, and in particular it'll be the part 2 to the first installment featuring my original RC10. And again, for those of you new to this particular series, I'm not going to dive into things that I would normally talk about in the buyer's guide. These series are simply intended to talk about my particular vehicles. This little guy here is very special because what you're looking at here is a vehicle manufactured out of nearly all the original parts from my original RC10. My original RC10, when I first got it, had a particular look to it, which it kind of lost over the years because it was an original 6-gear short A-arm, A-stamp chassis RC10. And over the years of racing it, it got more and more modified. It lost that original vibe. One day I realized that I was going through some scrap bins of RC10 parts and discovered that I had enough parts to build another car. Comically, I realized that all the parts that I was using were the parts that had come off my original RC10. So the front shock towers, the front shocks, the front A-arms, the front sway bars, which I was a massive fan of simply because of the appearance. I thought they just really looked neat. The wheels were the original ones on the RC10. That's why they're green on a body that has no green on it. The rear A-arms are not from my original RC10, nor are the rear hubs. The rear bulkhead is also not, and the transmission is not. Even though this car should technically be a 6-gear car, I could not bear with putting the 6-gear original RC10 transmission into this vehicle, so it did in fact get the Stealth. The motor in here is a yellow race prep. I don't know how well you can see it. You really can't. A side note of this motor, when I was 13 or 14 years old, I was at a racetrack called Covina Racing in Covina, California. If anybody out there remembers Covina Racing, I doubt it. It wasn't there long, but if you do, please leave a note. I'd love to hear your experiences. Basically, it was an indoor 8th scale track that ran gas cars, and they had these big vent fans in the roof which were never turned on, so you can imagine the smell in there. Nevertheless, the first time I had this car there, it had its original Parma motor, which I've got. That is the Parma motor it originally came with. Well, when I say originally when I got it used. Here we go, stay there. So this little motor here was what this, well not this, but my other RC10 came with. Anyway, it was lacking, one would say. So there was a guy there, an older guy. Now, granted, to a 13-year-old, someone who's 17 is older. This guy seemed to be in his 30s or 40s. And he said, hey, I've got this race prep motor that I'll sell to you. 30 bucks. I went ahead and bought it, and it was, it was in pretty bad shape. Now, granted, it's the same motor that's in the car right now, and it's still fully operational, so it couldn't have been that bad, but it was a well-hammered motor. Nevertheless, I went back to the hobby shop a couple days later near my house where I usually went to, Tony's Hobbies and Toys, which is still around, just at a different location, and this motor, brand new, was $25. So this jerk charged a 13-year-old more than this was worth. Who does that? Who finds a little kid with an RC car and decides, you know what, I'm going to screw this guy out of a bunch of money. Well, it's $5, whatever. Needless to say, that's the side note about the motor. The rear drive shafts, I don't know where these are from. They're from a newer RC10, obviously, because they are universals. This car should have had dog bones. The elephant in the room is obviously the body. This is not an associated body. And as I believe it is Parma, I thought there was a decal on here somewhere that told me what the body was. If anybody is familiar with this particular body, I would love to know what it is. I cannot recall. I want to say it was Parma, and I feel like it was called a Cyclone. But again, we're talking about 1993, 1992, around there. I have no recollection of what that was called. This was my my second ever successful paint job, and obviously was painted as an homage to the World Championship RC10 driven by the late Brian Kinwald. Let's go ahead and pull the body off. I think this car body really lasted pretty darn well. I mean, you know, the wings pretty, kind of worn out. There's a little crack here. Little crack right there. But given the fact that this body is going on 30 years old and was driven heavily, I think it's hung in there quite well. I really like the overall profile of it. Thought it was always really nice. It has kind of a little wing here at the rear. But yeah, I always liked it. Internally, we also have some old parts of mine. This is the first Airtronics receiver that I ever bought. It came with a Avenger AV2S 2-stick remote, which I really don't use anymore. I use this radio here. Now, I like this radio for the sheer fact that I can do this. That's it. It does have, all of its endpoints and all that. They made a number of these different Blazers. In fact, for a while, Team Associated sold a rebranded version of this with a lot of their cars. The speed control, which you can see under the little custom fan mount I made over here, it's just a little 3D printed superstructure with a fan on top to help cool the ESC. The ESC is a Novak 410 M5, which is the original. Actually, it was the first ESC that I've ever purchased. It's still fully operational. I did rewire the thing. When I put it in this car, I ran new wires to the ESC, so it was nice and tidy. The old ones had been cut and changed so many times it was a mess. I know this looks awful, but again, I'm not a fan of cutting wires, especially when I spent all the time of re-soldering wiring back into the ESC. I also like using these Tamiya bullet connectors, and I understand again that there's losses through these, losses through the additional length of the wire due to resistance and all that. I don't care. I just wanted it to be plug and play, so if I have to pull the motor out, I can pull the motor out without any issues. One grievance, of course, that I've always had with these Novak switches is that's pretty much how you install the switch. I've always planned to make a little mount for it, but I really haven't gotten around to it. This does have the transverse layout for the battery pack. When I originally ran these, I ran it axially because the battery packs I have didn't, or the battery packs that I had did not fit in this orientation, but the modern ones do in fact fit. A couple other changes in this. There is a ball race equipped steering bell crank system. I don't know who makes this. I found it in a bin of used parts, so I really have no idea where the heck it came from. The car is not built with particularly nice parts. If you flip it over here, the chassis again is not particularly nice. This front nose plate is the original one from my RC10, and the reason it's on here, it's probably kind of hard to see, but it's tweaked. I crashed it years ago and I could never get it straight, and I've gotten it better, but it's still a little crooked, so it's been installed on this car. Chassis also got some random holes from a previous owner. I have no idea what they were from. Gear covers an RPM unit. I've got a similar one on my RC10, even though it didn't show there on the original video. And this little motor cooler I always thought was really, really slick. It says Light Sync over here, but I don't know that that was the manufacturer. I think that was from Lightspeed or something. But nevertheless, it's a cool little part that replaces the original motor plate and has an adapter that screws the heatsink into the rear of the chassis for a little more rigidity. Tires, again, are the original Associated units from whoever knows how long ago they are, but they are original Associated tires. The speed control is a Airtronics 94102 and a Kimbrough servo saver, which is critical on these cars. The car also does have its original rear sway bar, which, again, I don't know how operational the thing is, but boy, does it look neat. Well, folks, this does conclude the My Car series on this, my scrap-built tribute to my original RC10. Since my other RC10 pretty much lives at the track, this car here is just nice to take out on the street anytime I want to have that deja vu feeling of what it was like to drive my original RC10 at the school parking lot before I had no other cars. This is not my only scrap assembled RC10. I've got one other that is 100% made of crap from a box. So if anybody's interested in seeing that one, leave a comment below. Otherwise, we're going to move on to some other cars like what ended up replacing my original RC10, my RC10 B2. Thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you next time.